Earlier in the week marked the triumphant return of the stories that would be appearing on the Guild Wars 2 main website, talking about the lore that maybe the game itself can't establish. Now, everything has kicked off here at the start of Living World Season 3 with 2 sets of notes published in different blog posts from Taimi in Rata Novus. So, Heart of Thorns concluded, and we've had a really long wait where we haven't known what's going on. Well, we get a bit of a look into that, perhaps, with these notes from Taimi. Well, since the second set of notes, the third and final set were then revealed a couple of days later. I wish I could have put all 3 of them into the same video. I guess my own excitement and desperation to share it with you guys too quickly kind of got the better of me here. So this is going to be, today, Rata Novus Notes Part 3 from Taimi, but also, after the Notes Part 3, very recently, on just the 21st, a really short period of time before Living World Season 3 starts, there was another almost lore blog post I want to cover with you guys as well, called An Interview with Queen Jennah. So, let's do one and the other, starting off with Rata Novus and Taimi. Rata Novus log, entry 17. You know what, journal? These Rata Novans might have been onto something. There's a primal pleasantness I'm feeling about living underground, being constantly surrounded by soil and sediment and geological history. It's like Tyria itself is giving you a dirt hug from all angles. Being born in Ratasum, I only really knew about surface life, except that one time I fell into a deep ditch, but I get it now. Primordus forced us above ground, and the Rata Novans said no. I like to think if I were alive back then, I'd have made a similar stand, and then realised the Chuck problem ahead of time, naturally. So now I carry on their work. I feel obligated to them in a weird way. They knew running from the dragons wasn't a permanent solution. We have to turn and face and vanquish. That was the brave philosophy they put forth, which is kind of ironic considering how living underground could be misconstrued as burying your head in the sand. I owe it to them to finish what they started, and this time, it's personal. Ha! I actually meant that, but then I realised how cliché it is. But it's apt, so very apt. I guess this is how the cliché started in the first place. Anyway, Primordus is first on my list because the bulk of the research here is focused on that dragon, but I recently hit upon a few nuggets of information on the beast in the Crystal Desert. The Exalted and the Novans shared a lot of tech, and I guess some dragon data as well. They were as concerned with Kraukatoric as we were with Primordus. That's because they were constructed by the Forgotten. Now, the Forgotten were dedicated to Glint, and Glint was a former Kraukatoric, chief baddie? Champion? Yes, a champion who went rogue and tried to protect all peoples from the dragons, my type of lady. After her death, they went to great efforts to ensure the safety of her legacy, and you know what a big part of that legacy is? The egg! I wonder if the commander would mind if I borrowed it from Tyria for a little testing here in the lab. Wow, I gotta get a hold of myself. I bet that's how Kaith's logic worked when she took off with the egg in the first place. Okay, so maybe I can't or shouldn't physically get it here, but if there was some way to keep an eye on it, this bears investigating. Another gift from the Exalted is the Leyline map I mentioned earlier. Now that the fireworks show has slowed down a little, I think I've noticed quite a bit of Morgemoth's old energy sliding in one particular direction. I say I think because honestly the magic's movement is still erratic enough that I can't tell if it's a pattern or not. Also, I don't even know how reliable and accurate that map is. The evidence flowing in could be misleading. Once I get it dialed in, I think it might be time to craft a letter to the best dragon slayer I know. Hopefully my research will do right by the Novans, and the commander and I will soon be able to turn and face and vanquish. Oh man, alright, so before we move on to the Queen Jennah speech, let's talk a little bit about what we heard here from Taimi. There's quite a lot to pick at. I'll try to go roughly in the order of what we saw here in the blog post. So one of the first things I want to mention, okay, is that line early on where Taimi's like, oh, I would have figured out about the Chak in the first place. I think that there have been 2 camps of people interpreting this line, and I want to be kind of clear what you should take from the line. Now, it's not that Taimi is crazy special and genuinely is ridiculously smart and is, you know, this magnificent, wonderful enigma of all the Asura that we should totally look up to because every single character in Destiny's Edge 2.0 has to be a special snowflake, and that Taimi genuinely would have figured out about the Chuck first. It's not got anything to do with that. This line is specifically because she's an Asura, and that's why I love this line so much. The Asura are big-headed and arrogant, and they're boastful, and they like to think that they can have all this stuff figured out, and maybe like many of us in the real world, they don't quite realize to what extent hindsight is 20/20 guarantee. And so I love that about her, that she's so typical of many other Asura, that she's got this great bravado and confidence about her own capabilities. And that line is really, really cool. I honestly wouldn't read that into, oh wow, Taimi is a super special specimen of the Asura species. I don't think it's supposed to be quite that far. But moving on to some more juicy narrative stuff, let's talk a little bit about Primordus. Now, I've already done a video earlier in the week talking about why I think we might be going to the Fire Island chain. I've also got a video you guys may or may not have seen just yet where I'll talk about whether I think the Fire Island chain relates to Primordus. But I think it's fair enough to say, if anything, that this one blog post here does put Primordus a bit more on our radar, doesn't it? Maybe not any more than Heart of Thorns itself did, because if you guys remember, in those moments of the Rata Nova story in Heart of Thorns, we already saw images of Primordus, and Taimi already mentioned that they had a serious beef with Primordus. I've actually talked about this on the channel a little bit recently, that if you look at the time when the Rata Novans were most active with their city, standing in defiance of the Elder Dragons, honestly, this was at a period of time in history where not many of the Elder Dragons had made much known about themselves at all. Primordus was the first and had specifically really impacted the way the Asura functioned way back then, and so that's why they cared so much about him. I really like this, but obviously they're still writing about Primordus even today. I think if you visualized a doomsday clock for every Elder Dragon, this has just moved the minute hand a little bit further for Primordus to midnight. We're now at like 1:45. And of course, we also have that weird note towards the end where she mentions the leyline energy map might be suggesting the energy is all moving to one specific place, or that there is a creature in a specific place that's taking all of this energy on board. And the notes give us that tease without actually telling us where that's going. Could that mean that that energy is headed towards Primordus? Who knows? Obviously, the other Elder Dragon that gets a big mention here is Kralkatorrik. I absolutely love that in this little post here, we hear Taimi herself outwardly wondering the relationship between Glint and Kralkatorrik. Because how Glint, or Glorst as she was known, specifically came under control of Kralkatorrik, whether there was a physical relationship there, as in Glint could have been the offspring of Kralkatorrik or something, has always been a hazy area, and the fact that Taimi's wondering this makes me think, hey, the writers have been wondering this too. They're holding a mirror up to themselves, and maybe at some point in season 3 or beyond, they'll actually give us more details on that, more details on Glint's life back when she was Glorst. That would be absolutely freaking awesome. Moving on the Kralkatorrik idea too, I also love the way that he's described as the beast in the desert. Now, I do want to focus on this for a second because there are certain areas of the lore speculating community that for a while have been suggesting Kralkatorrik isn't in the desert at all. Those of you who follow my channel closely will know I've never really talked about this or gone on board because I think that's a foolish speculation to make in the first place. It's generally based on the fact that we have a story of the Zephyrhites who visited Glint's lair after the events of Edge of Destiny and before we met them on their airship in one of the Season 1 patches, and because they never directly ran into this Elder Dragon there, well then of course that means he's not in the Crystal Desert at all. I've always thought that was a bit narrow-minded. I think that's a bit too shallow. The Crystal Desert is a huge area, and just because the Zephyrhites never directly found Kralkatorrik on that exact moment right then and there, it didn't, to me, then mean that he couldn't have been in the desert at all, and there's just no precedent for him to have moved elsewhere. Then we have this post, and it's really interesting that they never specifically said Kralkatorrik in the Crystal Desert. They say the Beast in the desert. But I'm pretty sure the Beast in the desert is referring to Kralky himself, especially considering, you know, those ties that Taimi's talking about right here, that you had these two cool ancient civilizations. Are they technically ancient if it's only 200 or so years ago? But one focused on Primordus, the other, the Exalted, focused on Kralkatorrik. That's very, very, very cool. Another little thing to pick at here, it's described that the egg, this is only from Taimi's perspective, granted, but I think that she's kind of speaking with some authority here. It's stated that the egg is a big part of Glint's legacy. I was almost excited to think Heart of Thorns was setting up this egg as just maybe even a small cog in the whole legacy, and that Glint had a great many other plans and locations and things for us to find and peoples like the Exalted that she'd set up, and that the egg was just one moving component. But here, with them saying that the egg is a big part, I wouldn't get wide-eyed like I did once upon a time, expecting so many more things to be a part of Glint's legacy. Maybe minor things here or there, but I think what this is kind of trying to show us is this is about the egg more than anything else. close, which is fair enough. And so that's pretty much it. We do end as well on that interesting note that Taimi might send us a mail. And wouldn't that be something? The start of episode 1 or episode 2, 3, whenever we get back to Taimi, that she throws a mail at us saying, hey, Commander, I've learned X, Y, and Z, and we roll directly into whatever she has learned. That would be absolutely awesome. And there you go, guys. That's the notes from Taimi. Let's move on now to the next little lore post. It's got nothing to do with Taimi. In some ways, it's far more interesting, however. This is an interview with Queen Jennah of the Humans. Now, why would we be getting such an interview? Well, don't forget, many of the current events in the game right now have been dealing with Crichton stuff, and the implication is that we might be about to experience a giant attack on Divinity's Reach in an attempt, perhaps, on the Queen's life. And so this is an interview, seemingly from the Queen, trying to console her people that really, this isn't a big deal. They're just a few, white mantle fanatics, and they're not large and don't really have any power. So let's see what she has to say. Question 1. Who poses these questions? We have no idea, by the way. Don't know whether they'll go into that eventually, but here we go. So question 1. The White Mantle's activities of late are putting the populace on edge. What does the Crown plan to do about them? And so she says, first, let me be clear. Denizens of Divinity's Reach have nothing to fear. We are taking steps to bolster security in and around Divinity's Reach to ensure the safety of our citizens. The Shining Blade is keeping a close eye on the Mantle's movements and activities, most of which are localized to mere raids in northern Maguma. These aren't the calculated motions of an organized group. These are the isolated activities of a handful of conflicted and deeply disturbed people. Nothing more. So the next question, question 2, is what sort of security steps are you taking? And so she says, the Seraph are stepping up their patrols in Shaymore. What's more, we've tapped the best engineering teams in the Reach to bolster the city walls and shore up any weaknesses in our defenses. In the event of a crisis, my advisors have developed plans to evacuate the townships surrounding Divinity's Reach and house civilians within the safety of the city walls. But I must stress that these preparations are focused towards true crises, natural disasters, dragon sightings, and the like. Seraph Captain Logan Thackeray has not been seen in some time. Can you speak to his status? Captain Thackeray suffered heavy injuries in the fight against the jungle dragon Morgemoth and is currently recuperating. One of my aides checks in on him regularly and says that he's coming along well. Knowing the captain, I imagine he'll resume his duties as soon as he's physically able and cleared to do so, and not a moment longer. There's not a force interior that can stand between Logan and his charge. Have you seen the captain yourself? I have not. Sadly, ruling a kingdom has a way of occupying one's time, particularly with the troubles we've seen of late. But my aides are keeping me well appraised of his progress, and I have the highest hopes for his quick recovery. He is ever in my thoughts and prayers. May Dwayna watch over him. What news of the Pact? What measures are the Crown taking to support it? Regrettably, the Pact's campaign in the Maguma jungle cost many lives, and allied forces are still regrouping following the assault on the jungle dragon. General Almora Soulkeeper is working tirelessly to support these efforts, and in turn, we will give whatever support we can to the General. I'm confident that the Pact will persevere under her leadership and guidance. Beyond the Pact's casualties, many Crichtons perished in the assault on Morgemoth. Do you have any words to share with your people regarding the Fallen? This conflict was by all accounts one of the truest tests of resilience and resolve the Crichton has ever faced, and though we claimed victory in the end, that victory came at a heavy price. I've heard the cries of anguish of our people in the wake of these losses. We extend our deepest condolences and our unending gratitude to the families of the fallen for all they've sacrificed in the name of our brave nation. It is now incumbent upon all of us to never forget the courage and valor of those we've lost and to ensure that their great sacrifice was not in vain. And what of the Seraph's casualties? How depleted are their ranks? A small detachment of elite Seraph forces was dispatched to join the Pact fleet on their ill-fated incursion into the Maguma jungle, where they were set upon by Mordrum. While we have yet to receive a full report on the casualties, several Seraph have been recovered from the jungle, and we hope to find more as our search parties continue to scour the region for survivors. I ask that all citizens of Divinity's Reach keep our brave soldiers in their thoughts and prayers to Melandru. I really like this post. There's so many little references to the gods there, like Melandru gets a look in at the end. I don't know why we're looking to Melandru. Dwayna had a bit of a mention before. I always feel like the devs do very well while they're writing the human-based stuff. But so what can we pick at here? Again, I wonder what the context of this interview is supposed to be, if it's going to be in the world in any way. Is this some kind of Divinity's Reach newspaper? Was this some big press conference taking place just outside the throne room or something? Again, who was asking the questions? But so you'll also see a little bit from this when they focus on the fate of the Pact. We get some really good information, but I think also some of these looking back at our losses ideas are pretty interesting in this post that we'll see come across in-game as well, in that we're going to be mourning the death of Air, but we've also got a lot of other characters to mourn the deaths of too, no? So yes, let's talk about that thing with the Pact. I think that's the biggest thing here. I do have a video coming out where I speculate about the fate of a lot of the characters, and people had been wondering if Lorantha of the Wild was going to be the guy that sort of takes the place of the leader of the Pact. And I said in the original cut of that video that I felt like this wasn't very likely, or it wasn't something I liked the idea of, because yes, they seem to be setting it up a little, but does Lorantha have to be the leader of the Pact just because he happens to be another male Sylvari, just as Trahearne was once before? That would come across a bit shallow to me. But here we get maybe more interesting information that Almora's Soulkeeper is stepping up. I think that makes a lot of sense, because in her capacity as leader of the Vigil, there's a lot of her skills and her understanding of what's going on that translates for the Pact itself too. And now we've got a very different character on paper, right? We've got Almora, who's a female Char, totally different to what Trahearne was in theory. So that should be very cool. I'm looking forward to as well that being an opportunity for the devs to go not just into human storylines, but also human versus Char storylines, which have been all but almost entirely abandoned. If we are thinking of a storyline here where Queen Jennah is killed, and we look at a White Mantle-based humanity, we're going to see the peace treaties stall. We're going to see a lot of interesting developments there. The fact that Jennah is so lacking in prejudice, the way she regards Almora, is definitely something noteworthy. That so much progress has been made, that pits her in a very interesting place. That pits like the Pact against the peoples of Kryta if the White Mantle succeed. Think about that for a second. Also, we do get this story as well about Logan. What's happened to Logan? He's okay, but he hasn't even been seen by the Queen herself. Who is this aide? Perhaps that's Anise. I'm always suspectful that it could be Anise that's actually gone off to see Logan, make sure he's okay. No word there of Zoja at all, even though Zoja may have sort of a similar fate there. And generally speaking, we just seem to be getting the royalty kind of sweeping things under the rug when it comes to Logan and giving us generic sort of PR-y responses to keep people calm. Convince them that the White Mantle aren't that big, when even though they could actually be very big, as the raid dialogue and Zera's dialogue has suggested, that could eventually lead to a very real attack on Divinity's Reach here, which is super exciting. I did a video quite recently about the Infinity Ball storyline, where they refer to an attack on Divinity's Reach. All this stuff coming forward. So there you go, guys. That's story time. That's what they gave us on the blog post. I doubt we'll get another one of these before the patch itself comes out, but if we do, I'll be here to cover it for you. If you like the kind of speculations that I've given here, keep an eye on the channel, because I have an hour-long discussion of pretty much every single character that has been relevant since the concluding moments of the personal story, and what they might end up doing in Season 3 and beyond. It's a big video, but hopefully you guys like it. We cover some of these topics over there as well. So thanks very much, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon. Not too many days left now.
Long-buried secrets were uncovered.
There is new VO basically describing the events of Heart of Thorns. Reminds me an awful lot of one of the trailers we got before.